Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining on what I know, thanks to the budget announcements today, is quite a busy day for many of you, so thanks for taking the time. My name's Sophie Grensis and I'm thrilled to be your host for our panel today. Over the next hour, I'm really excited to bring together a fantastic group of people for a discussion on how organisations are turning AI ambition into reality and how organisations can deliver transformation that truly serves people. We're just going to give it a few minutes to let everyone join the session. In the meantime, I'll just spend a moment setting the scene and talking through a few housekeeping points. So this event is part of what we call CC Month, which is our month-long programme dedicated to people-centred transformation. Originally, CC Month was focused on customer experience, and we even called it Customer Centricity Month. But it's evolved to reflect a broader truth, which is that great organisations design for customers, citizens and colleagues alike. So throughout November, we've been bringing together experts from across sectors to explore how organisations can move beyond the AI hype and put people at the heart of meaningful, sustainable change. Before I introduce our panellists, a few quick housekeeping things. So firstly, this is a one-way webinar, so no one can see or hear you unless you're on the panel, so you can relax and enjoy the session. If you'd like to ask questions, and we really encourage you to do that, please, then you can use the Slido on the right-hand side of your screen. You can submit questions with your name, or you can do it anonymously, and you can do it any time throughout the session. And then towards the end, I'll put some of those questions to our panel. If you'd like to turn on closed captions, you can find that option in the bottom left corner of your screen. So now I'm just going to briefly introduce today's panelists and try and do them justice, and then we'll move into our discussion. So in no particular order, we've got Leslie Pink, who's Head of Adoption for the Home Office's Law Enforcement Data Service. So Leslie, I know you've led highly complex infrastructure programs, and you recently oversaw the Home Office's large-scale trial of Copilot. It's brilliant to have you here. We've got Graham Burns, who's the AI Strategy, People and Communications Lead at Nationwide, where he's helped to shape their generative AI strategy and principles and design the operating model and establish an internal AI council. Got Erica Bannerman, who's Managing Director of NHS Shared Business Services, who brings with her a wealth of leadership experience from across the public and private sectors. Zoe Canning's a Senior Director at Oracle, partnering with organisations, including some of those on our panel today, to plan and execute their strategies through modern enterprise technology. And then finally, we've got Neil Gladstone, who leads the UK data and AI practice at Sopra Steria, partnering with clients to deliver efficient and ethical data and AI solutions that support organisational transformation. So as you can hear, there are a real breadth of experience from across different sectors. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to begin with what I really see as, I suppose, the big pitfall or risk around AI transformation, which is that overwhelming focus on the technology itself and that being used as the starting point. So Leslie, I wonder if you could kick us off on how we can ensure that people are actually at the centre of AI transformation and why that's important to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sophie. So thinking about it and thinking about AI as a technology within the Home Office, when you start talking about AI, what happens immediately is that everyone sees the threat. I mean, literally across the board. So we have Homeland Security stand up an entire team to look at that threat. And it's a very real threat. But whilst the focus is on the tech and on the threat, you don't see the potential. You don't see AI as an enabler and what it can truly offer people. So whilst I was leading the Copilot trial, so this is 365 Copilot, the licensed product, one of the things that became really clear in terms of AI as an enabler is what it can offer for neurodiversity, how it supports our neurodiverse colleagues. So we ran a dedicated cohort as part of the trial to see what the impact was and how it might possibly be able to support, with no real sort of anticipation of what the outcome might look like. And the results are really quite staggering. It literally levels the playing field. the ways in which it supports. So, for example, I'm neurodiverse myself. I have autism and ADHD. And one of the things I do, so I might have a personal coach, or I might just go around bothering more senior people for advice when something comes through like an email that everybody else may understand, and of course I don't. Like, what does somebody mean by this? What do I do with this? How do I respond to this? And that's not an easy thing. And also it makes you feel very vulnerable when you have to say, well, really, I don't understand what my line manager wants from me when they're putting this email in front of me. So to be able to go to Copilot or a similar, or Chat GPT or whatever, and say, what does my line manager mean by this? And what is it they want from me? And an answer is the most incredible thing, that ongoing dialogue that supports you through that process. So Copilot, for example, as a personal coach for neurodiversity, is just one example of its use. But the results we've seen have informed the Ernst Young um, survey study undertaken by Microsoft specifically on neurodiversity and AI. Yeah, the outcomes. We've now put a strategy in place, which is the first across government, for Copilot as to support as a reasonable adjustment for people who are neurodiverse. And I'd like to start working on negotiations with Microsoft over a social tariff for Copilot, specifically as a reasonable adjustment, which could be across public sector.
That's brilliant, Leslie. I can really hear about the huge impact that's had on people, and for you personally as well. Thank you. Graham, I wonder if we could go to you for, I guess, that kind of private sector perspective on this. So what does it mean to you? How can we ensure that people are at the centre of AI transformation?
By the way, that's a fantastic story, and really lovely to hear some positive stories around AI. And I'm going to reflect a little bit on the importance of storytelling as part of making sure that people are the centre of what you're trying to do. But I think I probably want to take a step back from that and just think about what we do at Nationwide. So in setting up our whole AI council and proof of concept review and so on, one of the key part of our kind of review of any AI that we put into our business is that whether it will fulfill our purpose. So our purpose is banking fairer, more rewarding for the good of society. And so we ask ourselves that question for every bit of technology that comes to us and we want to look at. And there's a lot out there. Literally every single software provider or IT providers, I'm sure some of the people who are watching this are inundating people with lots of AI solutions. So that first question, how will it help us deliver our purpose, is probably the most important thing that you can do as somebody who is looking at AI at the moment, and really think about whether it connects you to the purpose. Because if it doesn't, what you're going to do is, you're going to find that you're going to have a disconnect in your organization with you trying to deliver technology and also trying to deliver your purpose. And then the second question that we ask is, will it enhance meaning for our customers and for our colleagues? So that is a really important question, because AI could literally do anything you want in your organization. And to actually get to a point where you're sure that the technology will actually bring an enhancement to their lives, and that doesn't have to be for both colleagues and customers, but ideally that would be fantastic, is a really, really important step, and something that I think that not enough organizations are doing, and it's probably why we're seeing some of the failure rates that we have in terms of AI adoption. If I can, I'll probably just explain a little bit more about what I mean by that, just by using an example, Sophie. Is that okay? Just because I think it might just bring it to life.
Absolutely.
So we have a proof of concept at the moment running with our contact centers, and in that contact center, in that AI technology, effectively the benefit would be that we might reduce the average handling time by 30 to 40 seconds. And in our world, that translates to like 600 FTE a year. That's really important. Like, that's a huge saving for the organization potentially. And if I'm an accountant or a contact center manager, those things would suddenly kind of light up in my mind. I'd be like, that's amazing. But you go try telling that to a colleague who's working in a contact center, and they'll have a very different reaction, because what that will mean to them is, I'm going to get more calls potentially on a more frequent basis. But when you sit down and you talk about how it's going to help deliver your purpose by introducing technology that will transcribe calls that will nudge contact center agents to think about whether the customer has a vulnerability, that it will wrap up that call and take the notes at the end of that call, that it will enable the colleague to quickly access the right documentation to be able to provide that customer great service. And you put all those things together and you say, that will really help your work become more meaningful and will really help your customers have a more meaningful experience. That's a very different story that you're telling about the use of AI. And then just to summarize at the end of that, we could take that 600 FTE saving, but actually what we're going to do is we're going to hand it back to our agents and say, spend another 30, 40 seconds on the call with each customer. So when you start building a proposition like that, and you talk about putting people at the center of it, both customers and colleagues, suddenly you have a completely different story and a different narrative to tell about AI.
Mm-hmm.
That's brilliant. I love that connection back to the purpose as well. That's a great way of thinking about it. Actually connects really well to our next question, because I feel like you're starting to answer it actually, Graham and Leslie, through what you're doing in your organizations. So many organizations have bold AI strategies on paper, but I'm interested in what separates those who make real progress from those who get kind of stuck in that hype or pilot phase. So Zoe, at Oracle, you partner with lots of different organizations. What sets the most effective ones who actually make progress apart from the others?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sophie, and really great start to the webinar. So it's really great hearing some of the stories from everybody. I'll place what I'm about to say in a bit of context, because those that are familiar with Oracle, and many won't be, but we've kind of had a reinvention as an AI company recently, kind of jumped on that bandwagon. But Oracle provides a variety of what we call custom AI, so people building proprietary models, and then what we call embedded AI, which is really about taking the Oracle database and Oracle business applications, both front office and back office, and then embedding AI all the way through the stack into those applications. So I actually work in that embedded AI area, just to provide a bit of context. And so arguably, because a lot of our customers in that area aren't actually starting from scratch in any way with AI, essentially they're able to switch AI features on that are just available to them. And so you might think, well, why isn't everybody switching them on then? So I think that's a really interesting point. So when we're talking about people getting stuck in pilots and getting overwhelmed by the hype, what we've really found is there's a bit of a Goldilocks analogy to it. And I'd be really interested to know if this resonates with the rest of the panel. Because we've worked with organizations where at the very start of their journey, they focused on individual features. And it was a kind of IT or project-led initiative to switch on as many individual features as they could, particularly looking at the less risky ones, particularly if we look at our sort of the EU AI Act kind of risk profile and those sorts of things. And what we found there was it was really hard for those organizations to justify moving to the next phase and warranting that additional investment required, because they were focusing on it from a technology and digital point of view, which I think comes back to the previous point. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we had organizations taking that very bold approach, very holistic approach, and trying to almost do too much, like run before they can walk kind of thing. And I'm from a HR background, so I do a lot in our workforce capability space. And so I'll just give you an example of putting in place AI-enabled skills ontologies across the organization, right? So on the face of it, it's a skills catalog. AI enables it to connect different artifacts within the solution, helping with data points, helping to suggest opportunities and jobs and things for employees. So on the face of it, switching that on, fairly simple. And yet when you think about it, the implications for the organization are actually quite widespread. What does that mean for recruitment? How do we recruit? How does my performance get measured? What does that mean for my learning objectives? And what's a skill and what's competency and what's a certification? So what started off as switching on a couple of features actually then becomes a very wide kind of existential problem that the organization needs to spend a lot of time thinking about. And so what we actually settled on with a lot of our customers, I'm talking thousands globally, is that the bit in the middle, okay, which is looking at process or a service one by one, but rather than looking at individual features, actually taking a cluster of features that are spread throughout a business process or a service and starting to look at how do we make it tangible and how do we make it measurable. So again, if I take a HR example in the recruitment process, a very long and convoluted process for many organizations, what we've now found is by taking a cluster of features such as something that's candidate facing, where a candidate can see a suggested job based on their skills profile. And then at the other end, the job holder, the manager, the recruiter, whoever the end user is there, then actually being able to see suggested candidates, subject to your policies and all that kind of good stuff. And then you've got some business metric type AI features as well, such as time to hire, which is then tracking the projected time to hire and offering suggestions for how you might intervene to make that process shorter. And it was really timely because yesterday in my inbox landed 50 global examples. The lights just turned off, apologies. 50 separate examples just in HR of our global customers who have made significant strides in being able to measure that impact. And so one example I picked out was an organization that had done exactly that. Rather than doing a single feature or doing an entire business function, they'd actually taken that end-to-end recruitment process, and what they'd done is they'd switched on suggested candidate, they'd switched on recommended jobs for the candidate, and they've switched on that time to hire feature, and they had ended up over 3 months reducing their time to hire by 33% and roughly 70% reduction in the time taken to both raise a requisition and also fill in an application. So what you've got there is that very business focused service design approach to what does this look like end to end, and how can we usefully use these groupings of features in a way that's actually going to make a measurable impact. And then there's that virtuous cycle for, well, what can we invest in next? What's the next use case, and how can we make that tangible to people? I hope that helps, and I'd be interested to know if that resonates.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, I really like that idea of sort of picking the right size of problem as well on that kind of sliding scale. Neil, I suppose in a similar way, Sopra Steria partners with lots of organisations as well. Is there anything you want to reflect on what Zoe's just said, or what do you think sets organisations apart that does this well? You're on mute, Neil. You've got to have at least one small technical glitch on a thing like this.
Yeah, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry. Yeah, so I was just saying, I mean, there is so much hype in the market right now. So it's very hard for organizations to understand what to do and where to start, because there is so much AI out there and it's being pitched as the answer for absolutely everything. And I think the first thing you need to recognize that it isn't the answer to absolutely everything. And being the data and AI practice lead for Sopra Steria, it might sound a bit ironic saying that, but it's about picking the right tool for the job. But I would start even earlier than that. And in my career, spanning over 25 years in tech, any technology looking for a problem to fix is not the right answer, right? Organizations need to start with the business outcome that they want to generate. What is that purpose again that Graham talked about? What is the outcome that the organizations are looking to achieve, and really be clear on that, and then look at how AI can help you get there. And what that will do, that will ensure that if you can develop a solution or a solution set that can solve that particular problem or challenge, it's likely to be really impactful for your business. Therefore, it's likely to have that business case to support it, from scaling from a proof of concept out to a full scale out across the organization. Because so often what we see is technology ideas being experimented with, but then when you actually try and scale it out into the organization, there's just simply not enough of a business case to sit behind it. And that's often one of the reasons why these things fail. So I would say absolutely start with those target business outcomes in mind, and then apply how the technology can help you achieve that. And the second point would be, which I think does relate to what Zoe was talking about there, is understanding what the technology can and can't do. And this goes back to the point around, AI being sold as this nirvana for everything. It absolutely isn't, but also it can be a really powerful tool if you use it correctly. And it's about having that right expertise with you to be able to actually solve the problem. And an example of that would be, we had a customer come to us with some challenges where they were trying to use Copilot as a solution set for some really quite complicated use cases that they developed. And it didn't take us long, actually, when we looked at it and just said, look, it's great. The reason why you're stuck here is because the capability of technology that you're using just simply can't go to the level that you need it to. You'd be much better off using this different technology set. But they didn't have the expertise to be able to understand that from the outset. So I think it's about having access to that capability that can help you and steward you in the right direction with that. That will really help success.
Sophie, can I just add one really quick thing? Just for anybody who's watching, just if you're running proof of concept kind of approach, firstly, I just want to say well done, because probably you're in a minority. I would imagine only about 10 or 20% of organizations probably are actually have set themselves up to do that properly. And don't beat yourselves up. If you're experimenting with lots of things and attempting to innovate and things aren't getting through, this is all brand new technology. You know, this tech has not been around for really, 18 months, and some of the stuff that's coming on the market is barely been tested. You need to know, it's okay to have your wits about you and, kick the tires on the stuff that's there, and stuff is definitely going to fall by the wayside in this kind of, crazy time that we're in, where there's just an avalanche of software coming from everywhere. So don't worry too much about it, because amongst all of that, there will be some jewels that you will take forward and you'll learn from and be able to replicate elsewhere in your business.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. Thanks, Graham. It's a good reminder that, it is still really early, and it's good to be playing with these things and trying them out and experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't work.
Just wanted to add, if it's okay, Sophie, I think it's important to call back to what Graham originally said, actually, about the importance of those guiding principles on the meaning behind it. Because again, technology vendors, speaking as a representative of one, will bring you a whole load of kit bags to do different things. And some of it will be really, really great for one organization and do absolutely nothing for you. So it's really about that impact again, and assessing the impact before you start.
And I think that's why Neil's right to say you probably need some trusted partners around you who do understand the tech, if you don't have the capability to really understand what you're getting involved in. And there's a lot of not very good AI out there, and there's a lot of AI with problems in it, and there's a lot of stuff that people have got no idea how it works. And so when you go and kick the tires of it and you kind of go, how does it work? What controls have you got in place? And quickly get the answers like, I don't know. We're not actually ours. Mm-hmm. We're borrowing it for somebody else or something. And you kind of think like, well, so it's best, buyer beware right now is not a bad strategy to have as well.
Can I come in as well? So because buy and beware, it resonates with me. And Leslie's earlier point at the beginning around risk. So what we're looking for, Zoe, from our trusted partners, and you are one of those global scalable partners and part of the solution for the future, is you need to help us understand how we manage risk and how we build enduring capabilities. So we're taking the business requirements and being able to fail fast and create funding mechanisms which allow us and give us permission to be iterating and trying in the conditions and the framework that keeps us safe. That's what we're trying to figure out for those of us that are running businesses. It's that balance of innovation and mitigating risk so that we can build things that are enduring. So
also, it's a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? Right? Because historically, and again, from a tech perspective, we often think that our responsibility stops at the gate, when the PC turns off. But actually, what we're talking about here is a highly impactful, human affecting piece of capability that has the ability to do all sorts of things, good or bad. And so part of that risk profile isn't just whether the model is trained effectively or whether hallucinations handled or all those other different things, the algorithms working effectively, etc. But it is actually about how people are using it. And a lot of the risk profile might end up in that end as well. And so it's our responsibility to help both educate on what the potential implications are, but then work through with you in live real terms how it's actually playing out. Like I said, every organization will be slightly different.
Yeah, so you're talking about delivery for us now, because there's this piece around what do we adopt, because adoption keeps us safe. You know, the more customization that we're doing, the more risk we're bringing into the system, certainly when you're looking at software as a service. And then there's this whole change challenge and mindset change, which I know, Sophie, we're going to come on to, but what do you need to adapt? And, you know, some of us have been in business for 30 plus years, and we've got really strong muscle memory. So, you know, don't even know that we're doing things in the way that we're doing them. And so the whole customer user exposure in the plan to manage change is really important. I spent this morning with my NHS colleagues, because we have implemented one of the largest critical national infrastructure programs in Europe and it went live on the 1st of October. So we're now, 8 weeks in, and I was with a group of many of my NHS colleagues who are having to change everything around the way that they're working. And as much as we spent a lot of time getting ready for that, you know, it's still very different. So the decisions we make around what we deploy, how we deploy it, and how we manage the change really are so important. Otherwise, I think that, Graham, you know, these proof of concepts, which you're absolutely right, it's so easy to end up getting excited over something that's working, but is it actually going to give us the outcome and the impact that we need? We can easily get excited and take ourselves off into a scope creep or and we've seen that happening quite, you know, and you need that governance and discipline to ensure that you keep coming back to, is this actually giving you the outcomes you need?
Yeah.
I think on that point, Erica, that's great. Actually, it segues really nicely into one of the further questions that I've got about change and kind of how difficult that change can be. I like your point about muscle memory. So I suppose AI transformation changes how people work. So I wonder kind of what leadership behaviors or cultural shifts have made the biggest difference in enabling that change. Leslie, is there anything you would say about that?
Yeah, so definitely. I think that's one of the major changes that we've seen across the Home Office as a result of AI. So the cultural shift. So we talk about being agile. So we're all agile. You know, we've got government digital service. Everybody's agile. You'll find it on Gov.uk. This is what we do. Well, the secret is we're not really, because the concept, and someone's already mentioned it, of fail fast doesn't come into it. You are not allowed to fail. This is taxpayers' money and we can't waste it, and you can't fail. So if you do a pilot, well, then that's an extremely controlled pilot, and it's part of deployment. It's part of a rollout. So we just run this first, see how it goes, correct things, adjust things, then we roll out. It's not an experiment. The cultural shift comes in where all of a sudden we're experimenting, where actually when you talk about prototypes and proof of concepts, now we don't do this. AI trials and experimentation is completely new. So completely new to us. The idea that you do something and chuck it in the bin if it didn't work is not a concept that's embraced by ministers. You just don't go there. You don't dare go there. You know, that's a P45 moment. So it has brought about a massive cultural change. So in the early days of AI, when we were literally fighting for budget and looking at creating our own large language models, so we put together a Pathfinder team. We've so far done 5 AI Pathfinders, and we looked for opportunities when we talk about what is it you want to achieve with AI. So that's the starting point. Talk about the customer, your stakeholders. What is it we're trying to deliver here? What's the outcome we're trying to achieve? And so we tried to go as high profile as possible and built a large language model for something that you may have seen in the media, which was the asylum backlog. So this was the most high profile thing in the last government and arguably in this government. How could Home Office reduce the asylum backlog? And we built 2 large language models, asylum case summarization, which summarizes the documents. So typically in an asylum case, for an asylum caseworker, there will be a collection of documents, and that could be quite a vast collection, and they'll be in all different formats. They won't just be Word, you'll have PDFs, you'll have scanned in paper documents, there'll be all sorts of stuff in there. And so asylum case summarization, the AI doesn't make the decision for you, but it summarizes the information. In addition to that, something that caseworkers do whilst assembling a case and analysing that case and working with an asylum seeker is they do policy search. They search for legislation and policy that might be applicable in that situation, especially if they think the asylum seeker may appeal a decision. And again, that's enormously time consuming. So looking at both of those, we progressed from proof of concept through to scaling and then delivered this for the asylum case workers. And in total, asylum case summarization saved 23 minutes per case, and asylum policy search saved 37. So we're talking about an hour in total per asylum case, which has made a significant dent in the asylum backlog. So that's one use. We have 5 AI pathfinders in total, and they range from things like synthetic data, creating AI synthetic data for testing, for software, where we've got high classification data. That's a big, big problem in government. You might have top secret data. You can't get a data extract from that. How do you work with that? And then the security around that data is just, it's like trying to get into Fort Knox, I mean, literally. And it takes an enormous amount of time. So being able to create an AI-enabled synthetic data lake can literally change the way you work so significantly and speed things up with testing, with training. If you imagine all the uses of data extracts and what you can do with AI synthetic data, and it's so much more reliable because it encompasses all sorts of anomalies within data without you having to put in like a trillion data sets, so that a standard program can cover all eventualities from that data. So that's one major area where we've brought about a shift, and as a result of that, sort of AI trials and experiments is now quite firmly established within Home Office Digital. So that approach, the idea that we do proof of concept and then we'd look at, if that's successful, look at how we might scale that, how we might bring that out into the real world, and then look at what the impacts are, and then subsequently learn from that, or how we might do proof of concept and put it in the bin. So yeah, big change. And one of the things we did with Copilot on that subject was, so Copilot is a personal productivity tool. And when we put it out there with your average business user across the Home Office, we saw savings of 1 to 3 hours a week. That was it. So it wasn't a lot. It wasn't what we expected. And one of the reasons it wasn't what we were expecting was because actually Microsoft claiming sort of 70% time savings, we couldn't achieve that. The main reason for that was because people didn't even know what AI was most of the time. So although we trained people in Copilot, and so did Microsoft, they worked with us, people had such low levels of education and familiarity around AI that we weren't seeing optimized results. So we went for private office. This is the Permanent Home Secretary's private office. Now, you don't ever run a proof of concept or a pilot on these people, because this is like, they're kind of like off limits in your standard. They're the users you don't ever touch if you're doing something like that. But they also use AI every day. So we approached them and asked them to test it. And we looked at focused use cases. So we looked at the government's box notes, where we have to put together memorandums and notes for a minister, and how we might be able to use Copilot. And they came up with 60% time savings straight off. We then used it with things like freedom of information requests, where you have to gather data almost from across the organisation. And we see the same levels, 50 to 60% time savings in focused use cases. So different way of working from the standard use of Copilot as personal productivity tool. So it has literally changed the way we work and our view of how you might deploy a technology product or service.
sounds like it's sort of changed some of those boundaries as well, and what you are and aren't allowed to do in terms of design. I love that. The kind of, yeah, rule testing there is great. I'm going to move on to a little bit of a different topic. So I'd like to talk about some of the principles and values that should mean that AI is implemented in a way that serves humans. So Erica, I wondered if you could talk a little about how you're embedding ethics, transparency, and trust into the way AI is designed and used in your organisation.
Yes, absolutely. I've got so many questions for Leslie later. Anyway, we'll keep on this topic. So just coming back to Graham's earlier point around nationwide. So we have a joint venture. It's a Department for Health and Sopra Steria partnership. It's 20 years old. And what's really important is it's a purpose-led entity. So we're really clear on what our mission is, and we're really clear on what we're here to do. And so we're here to help the NHS save money and enhance quality so that it can improve health outcomes. And to do that, we need to do that with delivery of better outcomes, with care and compassion. So the care and compassion is really important, because when you start thinking about ethics and trust and transparency, you've got to build everything on those values. If you're building those values out, and when you have this huge opportunity and risk that comes and presents itself, also known as AI, you really need to think about how you go about it. So it's really important that when we looked at this, we didn't look at the tech opportunity at all. We started from the outcomes. And so we have a strategy. We're really lucky because we have a 10-year plan. No, what organisations have a 10-year plan? Truly, we have a 10-year plan. We have a 5-year strategy. And the last 5 years, it was to double in size, to treble our impact. So the measurement of impact becomes really important as well. And to do that, our challenge was a human one, because just as I've just heard Leslie talk about pathfinders, which enable you to scale, we needed to scale our organisation effectively in order to treble the impact we're doing. So the question for us wasn't, can we build powerful AI systems? But it was, can we deploy responsibly so that we can earn trust internally and externally to scale? And that meant that we needed to look at transformation of ourselves in order to help with, I don't know if anyone's come across the NHS 10-year plan that's just come out. But, you know, a lot of things need to change in order for us to look after the health of the UK population. So transformation for us meant embedding ethics into how we started to do things and fostering a culture of innovation. And that means you have to have a safe space to do things. You have to be able to fail. You have to be able to understand what managing change looks like. Certainly if you're a 20-year-old organisation that successfully deployed things in a certain way for a long time, and you need to embrace transparency because that helps you make those decisions. So 4 years ago, so just before this all started to gain momentum, we needed to make some decisions on what we would do. And what we first needed to do was make some decisions on who we partnered with. So Leslie, you've spoken and brought to life storytelling around the Microsoft journey you've had. Well, we were looking and saying, what do we need? And, you know, who can help us? And Zoe, you've mentioned that Oracle have been building out AI within its systems. We made a bet and we said we need to partner with some hyperscalers to help us design, build, test and deploy the future solutions that we could build out on. And unfortunately, we couldn't do it small because we needed to build something which is one of the many dozen critical national infrastructures within the health system. So when we went live with our solution, which is the future phase 1 of what we're going to do in October, we, on the first day, we had to make £17 billion worth of payments, which was the equivalent to 8% GDP. And this morning I was reminded of that because that could have been a bit of a problem if it hadn't worked. So the things we've learned, 3 things that are important in front of my mind, is ethics must be built in, not bolted on. So it was really important that we had responsibility, and responsible AI starts at the design stage, not at deployment. And so we needed to have guidelines for procurement, for development, and for governance. Really important. The second thing we've learned so far is culture is the catalyst for success. So when I listen to Leslie, I hear a change agent. When I think about a pathfinder, I need people who can be change agents and help us and lead us and show us that it's okay to do things in this way. And, you know, Leslie, you're very bold, and I would follow you. And this is the piece about culture. You've got to be really clear, because technology adoption fails without human adoption. You've got to be able to build trust, literacy, and that in the organisation is essential. And we're still early on in what we're doing. And then the third thing is governance enables innovation. It doesn't restrict it. It makes me sleep at night. You have to have clear frameworks and accountability to accelerate safe scaling, especially when you're in very complex data environments, which we are as well. You know, the records we're holding and our data strategy is really important to do that. So together with Soprasteria, we've created a well-aligned reference architecture, which is helping us drive consistency. And we're looking at reusing agentic AI solutions all the way. So we've got 50 pilots at the moment, and we're still early on in that. But we need that because we have made some decisions which will enable us to transform and scale in a phased approach, but in a safe one.
Brilliant. Thank you, Erica. Graham, is there anything that you would add? I saw you kind of nodding away there. So in terms of how we can embed things like ethics, transparency.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short. And you know, I think basically, well, our strategy as a whole as a business is that we're focusing AI on back office. So our customers won't touch that. They might touch the outcome of it, but they won't touch it. So I think it's really clear to say that, you know, we took an early decision that from a kind of trust point of view, we felt that our customers trust the outcome of a human interaction and or a digital app or whatever, but like we are not kind of interacting with directly with AI with our customers. And you know, that is because we're in a very experimental sort of phase, and we're happy to allow others to take that gamble and see how that goes, right? But like, it doesn't take much to destroy trust in that space. And I think that if you're considering the strategy, that's really, there's a lot to go after in the back office of your organization. And there's a lot that you can do to enable your colleagues, customers, or whatever, but you don't have to. They don't have to interact with it directly. So I think that's a really interesting point around trust. And then I think probably a couple of other points I made really quickly. We were really focused on building that governance. We have a obviously huge regulatory responsibilities with regards to our customer base, and the regulators are very, very keen to see what we've built and that it's fully robust. I think that there's a real we built an AI council. It's multidisciplinary across in our entire organization. Like every component of every use case is looked at through different lenses, whether that's data or HR or whatever. And our whole use case approach kind of ensures that we build in, exactly as Erica says, to every single use case that comes through gets assessed from all of those different angles. And then I think the ongoing model management of those things is super important. Like, you know, it's a participative intelligence, so it's not just like a conventional IT deployment. You're not just delivering a tech and then switching it on. The minute that people are using it, suddenly their horizons are going to be broadened by the nature of what they're using, and new things and new issues crop up all the time. You get model drift, models change all the time. You really need to be clear about, like, are you monitoring the outcomes from the technology that you're using? And I think that that's a really important part of trust, because you're trying to stay ahead of like what potential issues there might be and monitor them and understand how you might mitigate any potential issues. So coming back to that question you made around leaders earlier, that I guess that's been one of the other things that our leaders have had to learn, is that a more of a system thinking type approach. So it's not just the first issue, it's not just the implementation, it's the post-implementation. What happens next? What are the unexpected things that can happen? The second order, third order, fourth order effects that nobody considered, because the technologies like grows the minute that you put it into an organization. Things crop up, good things and not so good things. So I think staying that that model management that is really, really key to making sure that you've got the right ethics approach and the right trust in the technology that you're actually using.
Great, thank you, Graham. Zoe, you're on mute.
I am, yes. Thanks for spotting. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add a point there, because I completely agree with Graham. I think what's really key is, with that ongoing monitoring of the AI and the solutions that it sits in, and I can see a few questions about it in the chat, is that it isn't just incumbent on the IT or the project team to notice that, because I think it probably sounds really obvious, but if an AI tool is hallucinating, the first person that should probably see that is actually the business expert in whatever area that it's sitting in, which I think then itself ties back to what Leslie was saying about the importance of the organisation at large understanding what these tools are capable of, what they're actually doing within a certain business area. We have a kind of working principle at the moment, which is having the human in the loop. So it being really, really obvious when the AI is working, really obvious when a human needs to come in and approve something or check something. But as things evolve, clearly that's subject to change. So it's really, really important as an organisational kind of organisational effectiveness, kind of reskilling, whatever you want to call it, that the employees and service users, whoever they might be, actually know what to look for and don't just take it at face value. And I think this is a whole separate conversation, but I think there's some really interesting points around critical thinking and how we develop like knowledge and awareness generally, both. And I suppose in theory that's doable when you have a kind of contained workforce. It's difficult, it's not easy by any means, but when you're actually customer facing, like some of your services, how would you expect them to show up in an informed way? There's no way you can control that. So what other safeguards do we need in place to make sure that everything's working effectively, and that we spot things and address them as soon as they arise? That's the big challenge, I think.
Yeah, and I think you need a culture in the organisation that it's okay to speak up and say these things are working. It's not working as I intended, and also that critical thinking lens to be able to kind of go, is this an output that I'd expect? I think those things are muscles that a lot of organisations need to build, because you'll be in an environment where people will just be processing whatever they need to process. They might be doing it at pace, and they may just want to trust the output all the time. So you need to be sure that you're getting the correct feedback and tracking the outputs of the model that's giving you what you want, particularly when you're dealing with sensitive customer issues, as you would be in our business, for example, in the back office.
Which in turn then ties back to the veracity of the data. Where's it hosted? How's it processed? What else is coming into it? And understanding that whole supply chain, if you will, of where is everything being handled, so that you can track it back effectively.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to move us to some of the audience questions, because time has passed so quickly. There's so many different ways that we could take this conversation. So yeah, I'm going to take a few of the questions from the chat. So we've got one that's got quite a few votes there from Fiona. So she said, how as a society can we ensure we protect entry-level jobs, which are an important part of the economy, when, for example, Graham, you talked about taking out 600 call centre roles?
I want to be really clear. We're not taking out 600 roles. I think I made it clear to say, it's the opposite. I think businesses are going to find themselves in a situation where they've got capacity created by what they're putting in, the technology they're putting in, and that will create some interesting challenges and dilemmas for leadership as to what they do with that, particularly if you're in a PLC and shareholders are pressuring for return on investment. So we have a business model that enables us to maybe take some different decisions because we're a mutual. But I think that even within our organisation, that is a testy, that's a challenging conversation to have, right? Because our business sort of muscle memory is put in an IT thing, create some benefit, reduce headcount, reduce cost, right? Not like put in an IT thing, create capacity, do amazing things. So it's really it does come down to the leadership in businesses to what they were going to do. And I was at a roundtable last week with a number of the other banks, it's interesting to start to see people like Santander coming out and saying they're not going to start taking out jobs from an AI point of view. And some of the other banks and so on, we're all having this discussion.
Yeah.
Because we're at a point where we're realizing is, what's the social contract around some of these issues, right? And we're in danger of a race to the bottom if we're not careful. So I think it's not our strategy to do that, absolutely. Others definitely are in that space, but I know that this is something that we're watching really carefully, because our purpose is about banking for the good of society, and so we want to make sure that reflects our employee base is diverse and covers all demographics, particularly in a key demographic that we want to bring into our organization as customers. Really important.
Yeah, it sounds like you did there's such a powerful story there, and instead of so you make cost efficiencies and then you invest that back in people and in the organization. How do you convince kind of leaders in an organization to do that rather than just to take that money and run?
Because I think if you look at that business case that I talked about earlier, spending that extra 30 seconds, 40 seconds on the call with somebody who is a domestic abuse victim, or someone who's been through a financial coercion issue, or any of these really super difficult kind of issues that our contact center agents deal with day in, day out, probably 50 to 60% of our calls really probably are people in a vulnerable situation. And that could be any of us, any of our life stage. And I think that being able to do that creates value for us and creates value and meaning for the customer, because that customer will go away from that experience and they'll tell 5 other people about the experience that they've had. But they're also less likely to complain because we didn't hurry them through the call and send them the wrong information and do all those things. So you take your savings somewhere else in the process by reinvesting the capacity where it counts.
Yeah. Can I build on that, please? Just to build on the question and the answer. So the way we're approaching it is through our people development vision, because actually we're redesigning those roles and those junior entry roles for the future, and we're redesigning them for value. So historically in the UK, for example, we've had an outsourcing culture, which is, and I hate this phrase, labour arbitrage. Offshoring, all of those things that we've had for years and years and years, which is very UK centric. And actually, that we would look at an organisation in the view of a pyramid, and we would say, actually, if we can take those repetitive tasks out by embracing automation and agentic AI, etc., and you could then say, well, that's the early in career roles, and we are reimagining that. And we're looking at it around how we can create more value and how those early career roles can be supported, developed and trained to add even more value and move up the value chain. And that's super exciting for us. Secondly, it means that we can scale and grow. But to do that, we also then, in our workforce strategy, have to think about management and leadership development, because we will be managing virtual agents alongside human agents. And thinking about that whole spans of influence and management of the outcomes is a really new way to think about it. And that's why, and again, I come back to where Leslie started from and gave us that incredible example of the pilot that's been done successfully on neurodivergent requirements. I think there's so much we can do here, and we're not looking at those traditional ways of doing things now. We need to improve. And if I think about the challenge I'm here to get after on behalf of the Department for Health in health, we have a productivity challenge, and the productivity in the health system is actually operating pre-COVID. And so you can start worrying about that. What does that mean to jobs? So does efficiency and productivity mean the loss of employment? And it shouldn't at all. It should be creating much better outcomes. So we have all got to reinvent ourselves and find an environment where we can think differently and listen to each other. And today's webinar is a really good example of that, because every day is a school day for me, and I've learned so much. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Erica. So I think we've seen some examples of this today, actually, but there's a question here about effective leadership. So what does effective leadership look like in leading the organisation through a transformational change? Neil, you get to work with lots of different organisations. What do you think the key is to effective leadership?
Well, I think just going back to one of the points that we just talked about around actually making sure that employees trust what you're doing with this, so they don't feel threatened by it, because then you'll get engagement. And the point that we've just been talking about is if you use AI to drive efficiency and take cost out of the organization and get rid of staff, you're just not going to get the engagement from that group of people about what good looks like in the future. And I think if you've got the ability to reimagine how your business can actually work, rather than just looking at what it does now and just try and tune it with a little bit of AI to go slightly faster, if you can actually reimagine what the business or organization actually looks like, you can start to make some really groundbreaking shifts with regards to how you can provide better services to your customers. And you just simply have to have your people engaged in that process. If they think the outcome at the end of that is they haven't got a job, they're simply not going to engage. Whereas if they know that you're backing them and that they've got that trust, and actually what awaits for them is a new exciting world at the other end where they can actually add more value, do more exciting work, and getting rid of some of the mundane stuff that they have to do, you're probably going to get a multiplier of returns with regards to the kind of solutions that they will come up with will be so much better than anything that could be designed top down inside the organization. So I think it's really about leadership harnessing the power and knowledge that sits inside all their employees and staff that are out there on the ground doing what the business does every day, and reimagining that, but with the trust that they know they'll be part of it in the future.
I think that's a really good point, Neil, because I think that, for example, we talked about agents, AI agents and agentic, and like that requires you to have some knowledge of what the job is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like my background in HR and change and so on is like most job descriptions do not match what most people do in their jobs. And, so you need that information on the ground. You need the trust of those people to say, well, actually, what I do in my job is these things. Because if you kind of say, well, actually, if we had an AI to do some of those things, would that help? You can do more. You can do the things you like doing.
Yeah.
But you're never going to get to that. You're never going to get to that if you immediately put in some stuff, and what it looks like is you've just kind of used it as a means to reduce your headcount. You might get there in the long run, and there's ways to do it, but you need that trust of people, and you need to work with them at that level.
Yeah.
About collective ownership across the organization, I think, to kind of sum up what you're saying, like the co-creation and empowerment for everyone to try and chip into this.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of things. We're involved in a piece of research with the Institute of Future of Work and CIPD. We're looking at job design and so on, and they're kind of, one of the things that's coming out is all around involvement, and that really strongly can, how do we involve people in what's happening so that it's not a done to. So they need to reskill. They have the opportunity to see what's coming and think about the fact that how they adopt the technology and so on. But involvement's going to be a really important aspect of the rollout, and leaders having the skills to do that involvement properly and imaginatively is really important.
I think that's a really good place to leave it, although there's about 100 other things I would ask, but we've kind of looped right back round to that importance of that focus on people and empowering people. So I just want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists today. There's so many more things I would like to ask each of you. I've learned a lot, and I feel like we've almost got the startings there of like some quite good principles actually for how to implement AI successfully. So things like that failing fast, transparency, kind of empowering change agents like Leslie to be able to sort of do their thing, storytelling, all of that good stuff. So yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for joining as well. We hope this has given you some ideas for pushing forward your own transformation in a way that serves people, using AI as a tool to do so. This is the final webinar in our CC month series, where we've explored what it really takes to build organizations, services and systems that put people at the heart of AI transformation. And in the next few days, we'll send you a summary of the whole programme. So thanks again for being part of today's discussion, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.